The neutral observer, the stars had been at war for 25 years, and Earth had watched every moment of it. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the massive holographic display in the Deep Space Monitoring Station, watching red markers blink across the galaxy as another Vectari fleet engaged the Threnody Alliance near the Centauri Nebula. She sipped her coffee and made notes on her tablet. Just another day of cataloging distant destruction. Status report, Director Chen, came a voice from behind her. Admiral Morrison, Earth's military liaison to the Galactic Confederation, approached, with his usual stern expression. At 62, Morrison had spent his entire career preparing for wars that never came to Earth's doorstep. The Vectari pushed past the Threnody defensive line at Sector 7. Sarah replied, highlighting the battlefield on her display. 3 billion casualties in the last month alone. The Confederation estimates the war will continue for at least another decade. Morrison nodded grimly, and our status remains unchanged. Observer only. No military involvement, no taking sides, no interference. Sarah had recited these words so many times they felt hollow. The Confederation Council still believes humans aren't ready for interstellar conflict. They prefer us to keep documenting and stay out of the way. That arrangement had served Earth well for a quarter century. While ancient civilizations tore each other apart across the galaxy, humanity had prospered. Earth's population had grown to 12 billion. Human colonies had spread to 47 systems. Science had advanced by leaps and bounds, fueled by technologies shared by grateful alien species who appreciated Earth's neutrality. Sarah's personal communication device chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at the sender and smiled. Maya, her daughter, was calling from the research station on Kepler-4 for to be humanity's most distant scientific outpost. At 28, Maya had inherited her mother's passion for xenobiology and her father's stubborn determination to push boundaries. "Mom, you need to see this." Maya's excited voice filled the communication chamber. Her image appeared on the screen, showing the cramped laboratory where she worked alongside researchers from 6 different species. "We've made a breakthrough. With the Threnody biological samples, their cellular regeneration process could revolutionize human medicine." Sarah felt the familiar mix of pride and worry that came with having a daughter working on the galaxy's frontier. Kepler 442b was technically in neutral space, but it sat uncomfortably close to active war zones. "Are you maintaining proper security?" "Protocols, of course, Mum. We're scientists, not soldiers. Both sides respect our neutrality." Maya's confidence was infectious. Besides, what would anyone want with a bunch of researchers studying plant samples and bacteria cultures? That conversation had been 3 days ago. Now Sarah stared at the emergency transmission that had just arrived through the quantum relay network. The message was brief, clinical, and devastating. Kepler-4 for to be research station destroyed. No survivors detected. Cause unknown. Investigation pending. Sarah's hands trembled as she played the message again. 15,000 people lived on that station. Scientists, engineers, their families, children who had never known any world but the sterile corridors of humanity's most advanced research facility. Maya had been among them. Director Chen. Morrison's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" She couldn't speak. The holographic display showed the last known position of Kepler-4 for to be as a blinking yellow marker. Now it was gone. Just empty space where her daughter's life had been. Within hours, the official report arrived from the Galactic Confederation. The destruction of Kepler-4 to be had been caused by collateral damage during a Vectari military operation. The Empire had been targeting a nearby Threnody supply depot and had miscalculated their weapons blast radius. The research station, despite its protected neutral status, had been completely vaporized. Earth's President Williams delivered a formal statement, expressing deep regret for the loss of life and calling for a thorough investigation. The Vectari Empire issued a standard apology, claiming the attack had been an unfortunate accident and offering to pay reparations to the families of the deceased. Sarah watched the political theater with growing rage. Reparations, as if money could bring back 15,000 lives, as if credits could resurrect her daughter. The Galactic Confederation accepted the Vectari explanation without question. After all, accidents happened in war. Neutral parties sometimes got caught in the crossfire. These things were regrettable but unavoidable. But Sarah had access to data that politicians and diplomats never saw. The Deep Space Monitoring Station tracked every ship movement, every energy signature, every communication burst in 1,000 light-year radius. She had watched the Vectari fleet approach Kepler-4 for 2b. She had seen them adjust their targeting solutions. She had recorded their communications. The attack had been deliberate. Sarah worked through the night, piecing together the evidence. The Vectari had specifically targeted the research station, not the supply depot. Their weapons had been calibrated for maximum destruction against the station's unique shielding. Most damning of all, their communications had included references to the human problem and testing new protocols. She tried to take her findings to Admiral Morrison, but he was already under orders from Earth's government to accept the official story. "We can't afford to antagonize the Vectari Empire," he explained. "They control 30% of the galaxy's trade routes. Earth's economy depends on maintaining neutrality." Sarah tried the Confederation Council, but they dismissed her evidence as incomplete and speculative. The Vectari had too much political influence, and humans were just observers. Why would anyone listen to the complaints of a species that had never fired a shot in anger? That night, Sarah sat in her apartment overlooking the Pacific Ocean, staring at a photograph of Maya. Her daughter had been so proud to be part of humanity's first generation of interstellar explorers. She had believed in the peaceful mission of science, in the power of knowledge to unite different species. She had died because someone had decided that human lives were expendable. The communication device chimed again. This time the caller was Commander James Torres, Maya's former boyfriend and the head of security for the outer colonies. His face was grim when he appeared on screen. "Sarah, I've been investigating the Kepler attack. You're not going to like what I found." Torres had connections throughout the colonial defense network, relationships built during humanity's expansion into space. His investigation had uncovered shipping records, communication intercepts, and financial transactions that painted a horrifying picture. The Vectari hadn't just attacked Kepler-4 for 2b. They had been conducting a systematic campaign against human outposts for months, always making it look like accidents or collateral damage. But the pattern was unmistakable. They were testing human responses, measuring Earth's commitment to neutrality, and evaluating humanity's military capabilities. "They're using us as test subjects," Torres explained. "Every attack is designed to push us a little further, to see how much we'll take before we break. They want to know if humans will fight back or if we'll keep hiding behind our observer status." Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. "They're preparing for something bigger. I think they're planning to eliminate humanity as a potential threat while we're still weak and divided. The Threnody Alliance might be winning the war, and the Vectari need to secure their flanks. They can't afford to have humans develop into a military power. Over the following weeks, Sarah and Torres quietly reached out to others who had lost loved ones in the accidents. They found ship captains whose crews had been killed in suspicious pirate attacks. They discovered colony administrators whose settlements had been destroyed by natural disasters that showed signs of artificial acceleration. They connected with military officers who had watched helplessly as their people died while Earth's government ordered them to stand down. These weren't random tragedies. They were a deliberate campaign of extermination disguised as collateral damage. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She used her position as director of the Deep Space Monitoring Station to begin copying classified files, technical specifications, and intelligence reports. She identified every human with military experience who might be willing to act outside official channels. She began stockpiling weapons and supplies at remote locations throughout human space. Asterisk. She was no longer just observing the galaxy's wars. She was preparing to fight one. The final piece fell into place when Dr. Elena Vasquez, Maya's research partner, sent an encrypted message from a Threnody refugee ship. Elena had been off station when Kepler 442b was destroyed, and she had spent weeks gathering evidence of her own. Sarah Maya was working on something important before the attack. She had discovered that the Vectari were collecting human genetic samples from various colonies, not just taking them, but specifically requesting them through intermediaries. She thought they were trying to develop biological weapons targeted at human physiology. The evidence was overwhelming. The Vectari Empire had been conducting a secret war against humanity for years, using their political position to mask genocide as accidents. Earth's government either didn't know or didn't care, too focused on maintaining profitable neutrality to recognize the threat. Sarah gathered her allies in an abandoned mining facility in the asteroid belt. There were 37 of them at first, men and women from across human space who had lost everything to Vectari accidents. They weren't soldiers in any official sense, but they had skills, resources, and most importantly, they had nothing left to lose. "We call ourselves the Silent Watchers," Sarah announced to the group. "For 25 years, we've watched the galaxy burn while Earth stayed safe. Now they've brought the fire to our doorstep, and our government refuses to act, so we will." Their first target would be a Vectari research facility in the Kepler 438 system, where intelligence suggested human prisoners were being held for experimentation. It wasn't a military installation, so it wouldn't be heavily defended, but it would send a message that humanity was no longer content to be a passive observer. Sarah looked around at the faces of her companions, seeing her own grief and determination reflected in their eyes. They were about to start a war that Earth's government would disavow against an enemy that controlled half the galaxy. They had no official support, no massive fleets, no ancient weapons, but they had something the Vectari had never encountered before. Humans who had finally decided to fight back. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you made humanity personal. Asterisk. The human response. The Silent Watchers struck at dawn, ship time. Sarah stood on the bridge of the stolen Confederation transport vessel that Torres had liberated from a decommissioned depot, watching the Vectari research facility grow larger on the main screen. The station looked innocent enough, a cluster of white modules connected by transport tubes, orbiting the dead planet Kepler 438c. No military markings, no visible weapons, just the standard configuration of a scientific outpost. But Sarah knew better. Intelligence gathered from Elena's contacts in the Threnody Alliance had revealed the station's true purpose. It wasn't conducting research on alien biology or xenochemistry. It was a laboratory designed specifically for experimenting on human subjects. 15 minutes to intercept, Torres announced from the tactical station. He had traded his colonial security uniform for salvaged combat armor, but his voice carried the same calm authority that had made him one of humanity's most effective peacekeepers. No response to our identification signals. That wasn't surprising. The Silent Watchers were using a falsified Confederation transponder that identified them as a routine supply convoy. To the Vectari, they were just another boring administrative necessity. Beneath the attention of the Empire's brilliant military minds, Sarah activated the ship's internal communication system. All teams, this is Director Chen. You know why we're here? The Vectari Empire has been conducting illegal experiments on human prisoners for months. Our governments won't act, so we will. Remember, we're not here for revenge. We're here for evidence and rescue. The lie came easily. Sarah absolutely was here for revenge, and she suspected most of her team felt the same way. But they needed to believe they were better than their enemies, that humanity still stood for something noble even when forced to violence. The assault began with surgical precision. Dr. Marcus Webb, a former military engineer who had lost his son in a mining accident, used his technical expertise to disable the station's communication array. The Vectari couldn't call for help, couldn't warn their superiors, couldn't even send a distress signal. Lieutenant Sarah Park, a discharged naval officer whose court-martial had been overturned too late to save her career, led the boarding party. Through the station's docking bay, the Vectari guards had been expecting a supply delivery, not a military assault. They died without firing a shot. Sarah followed the boarding party through the station's corridors, her pulse rifle feeling strange. In her hands, she had trained with weapons during her mandatory service, but she had never expected to use them against living beings. The necessity felt cold and distant, like a scientific calculation rather than a moral choice. The first laboratory they breached contained equipment that made Sarah's stomach turn. Surgical tables designed for human anatomy, but modified with restraints that would prevent any movement. Specimen containers filled with human tissue samples, carefully labeled with dates and genetic markers. Computer terminals displaying research. Data that reduced human beings to test subjects and statistical measurements. Jesus Christ, whispered Dr. Amanda Foster, the team's medical officer. She had volunteered for the mission after her research partner had died in a supposedly random attack. They're not just experimenting on humans. They're trying to weaponize our biology. The data was worse than Sarah had imagined. The Vectari weren't just developing biological weapons targeted at human physiology. They were creating viruses that would spread through human populations while leaving other species untouched. They were engineering toxins that would be absorbed through human skin but remain harmless to Vectari biology. They were building the tools for genocide. Director Chen, you need to see this, Torres called from across the laboratory. He was standing beside a sealed containment unit, his face pale behind his helmet's faceplate. There are humans in here. They're still alive. Sarah rushed to the containment unit and looked through the transparent barrier. Inside, she could see 3 human figures strapped to medical tables, their bodies covered with monitoring equipment and intravenous lines. They were conscious but sedated, their eyes tracking movement with the slow, drugged awareness of test subjects. How long have they been here? Sarah asked. Torres checked the monitoring displays. According to these readings, at least 6 months, maybe longer. They've been kept alive for continuous testing. Sarah felt her carefully controlled rage beginning to crack. These weren't enemy soldiers captured in battle. They were civilians who had been kidnapped from human colonies and transported across the galaxy to be tortured in the name of science. One of them looked barely 18 years old, probably a student or young worker who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Get them out, Sarah ordered. Dr. Foster, prepare the medical bay. We're taking them home. As the rescue team worked to free the prisoners, Sarah continued exploring the station. Each new laboratory revealed fresh horrors. Vectari scientists had been dissecting human brains to understand how human decision-making differed from their own. They had been testing the effects of various toxins on human nervous systems. They had been studying human reproductive biology to find ways to sterilize entire populations. The worst discovery came in the station's central database. The Vectari hadn't just been experimenting on individual humans. They had been conducting systematic studies of human colonies, identifying genetic variations between different populations and developing targeted biological weapons that would affect specific ethnic groups while leaving others untouched. Sarah downloaded every file, every research report, every communication log. This wasn't just evidence of war crimes. It was proof of a planned genocide that would make the destruction of Kepler 442 be looked like a minor accident. Director, we have a problem. Torres's voice crackled through the communication system. Long-range sensors are detecting 3 military vessels approaching our position. They'll be here in 2 hours. Sarah made a decision that would define everything that followed. Instead of fleeing with the evidence, she ordered her team to prepare the station for broadcast. Using the facility's own communication array, she began transmitting the research data across every frequency, every network, every communication channel in the galaxy. The evidence went out in multiple languages, formatted for different species. Sensory systems, transmitted through diplomatic channels and black market networks alike. Within minutes, beings across the galaxy were seeing footage of human test subjects, reading reports of planned genocide, and learning the truth about the Vectari Empire's accidents. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The Threnody Alliance, which had been fighting the Vectari for decades, suddenly understood that their enemy was capable of developing species-specific weapons. Neutral governments that had maintained trade relationships with the Empire began questioning their asterisk. But the most important reaction came from humanity itself. Across 47 star systems, humans watched the broadcasts with growing horror and rage. The evidence was undeniable. Earth's government could no longer dismiss the attacks as accidents or call for calm diplomacy. The Vectari Empire had declared war on humanity, and now every human in the galaxy knew it. Sarah received the first response while the silent watchers were still evacuating the research station. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the communication screen, his usual stern expression replaced by something she had never seen before. Fury. Director Chen, what have you done? He demanded. But before Sarah could answer, he continued, Never mind. I know what you've done. You forced Earth's hand. The President has called an emergency session of the Confederation Council. We're withdrawing from observer status and declaring the Vectari Empire a hostile power. That was just the beginning. Within hours, Sarah was receiving messages from human colonies across the galaxy. Colonial governors were calling up their defense forces, Mining operations were converting their industrial equipment into weapons. Research stations were sharing technical data that had been classified for decades. Humanity was mobilizing for war. Dr. Elena Buscus-Meyer's former research partner sent a message from the Threnody Alliance's capital world. Sarah, the Alliance Council wants to meet with human representatives. They're offering a full military alliance. They want to share weapons, technology, and coordinate attacks against Vectari targets. The galaxy was choosing sides, and humanity was no longer the neutral observer sitting on the sidelines. The Silent Watchers had accomplished more than just rescuing 3 prisoners and exposing war crimes. They had awakened a sleeping giant. Sarah stood in the command center of the captured research station, watching as her team prepared to destroy the facility rather than let it fall back into Vectari hands. In a few hours, they would be fighting a running battle against superior numbers and advanced technology. Most of them would probably die, but they had already won the war that mattered. The Vectari Empire had spent years carefully orchestrating humanity's destruction, planning to eliminate the species before it could become a threat. They had counted on Earth's government remaining passive, on humans accepting their fate as collateral damage in someone else's war. They had underestimated what would happen when humans finally decided to fight back. Director Chen Torres called. From the tactical station, we're getting reports from human colonies across the galaxy. The Vectari are launching attacks on civilian targets, probably trying to destroy evidence of their research programs. Sarah nodded. The Empire was moving to Phase 2 of their plan, abandoning subtlety for direct military action. But it was too late. The evidence was already spreading across the galaxy, and humanity was already responding. Signal all human vessels. Sarah ordered. Tell them the Silent Watchers have completed their mission. The galaxy knows the truth about the Vectari Empire. Now it's time for humanity to remind them why observer status was never about weakness. The communication went out across the stars, reaching human ships, stations, and colonies throughout the galaxy. Sarah's words were simple but clear. We have watched in silence for 25 years. Now we fight. The Vectari Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had believed that humanity's neutrality came from cowardice rather than choice. They had assumed that a species without a military tradition would be easy to eliminate. They had never considered what would happen when a race of problem solvers, innovators, and survivors decided that the galaxy's status quo was no longer acceptable. Earth had stayed out of the galactic war for a quarter century, content to observe and document while ancient civilizations destroyed each other. But the Vectari had made it personal. They had attacked humanity's children, conducted genocide in the name of science, and dismissed human lives as expendable. Now they would learn what humans were truly capable of when they stopped watching and started fighting. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has been quietly studying your weaknesses for 25 years. Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that Maya would never see them again, but believing that her daughter's sacrifice had not been in vain. The Silent Watchers had spoken, and the galaxy had heard. Humanity was no longer watching from afar. The war had come home, and Earth was ready to fight back. Asterisk.
The arrogant arrival, the Croavan Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their massive war fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Sol system with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. 27 battle cruisers, each one a kilometer long and bristling with plasma cannons, formed a perfect attack formation as they approached the small yellow star and its collection of planets. Supreme Commander Zarketh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable Victory, his forearms crossed behind his back in a gesture of supreme confidence. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, giving them dense bones and powerful muscles that made them natural warriors. His crimson scales gleamed under the bridge lights as he studied the tactical display showing the pathetic collection of ships that Earth called a defense fleet. The humans had been broadcasting warnings for the past 3 days, ever since long-range sensors had detected the Kroavan fleet approaching. The messages were almost amusing in their desperation. "Stay back. Do not enter Terran space. This is your final warning." Zarketh's lipless mouth curved in what passed for a smile among his kind. Every primitive species said the same things when faced with the might of the Kroavan Empire. His tactical officer, Subcommander Velkris, approached with a data pad. "The third planet has increased its broadcast intensity, Supreme Commander. They claim that entering their space will result in our complete destruction." Velkris could barely contain his amusement as he delivered the report. "Their entire defensive fleet consists of 43 vessels, none larger than our smallest support craft." Zarketh waved a dismissive hand. "These humans are insects who have barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. They discovered faster than light communication only 50 cycles ago. What possible threat could they pose to the might of the Kroavan Empire? Still, protocol demanded that he at least pretend to listen to their warnings. Open a channel to their lead vessel." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of a human ship. Captain Sarah Chen stood at attention, her dark eyes showing no fear despite facing an overwhelming force. She was young by human standards, perhaps 35 Earth years, but something in her expression made Zarketh pause for a fraction of a second. There was no panic there, no desperation. Only a grim determination and something else. Was it pity? "Commander Zarketh," Captain Chen began, her voice steady and clear. "I am authorized by the United Earth government to deliver this message one final time. Terran space is protected by forces you do not understand. We are not threatening you. We are trying to save you. Please turn your fleet around and leave the system immediately." The bridge crew of the inevitable Victory burst into laughter. Even Zarketh allowed himself a chuckle. The arrogance of these creatures was remarkable. "Captain Chen," he replied, his translator converting his growls into human speech. "You have one solar rotation to surrender unconditionally. Your species will serve the Kroavan Empire as all others do. Your resources will feed our expansion. Your technology, primitive as it is, will be absorbed. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your world." Captain Chen shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. Earth isn't just another world for you to conquer. We've tried to explain this peacefully. Our planet, our entire system exists within a dimensional anomaly that our ancestors called the Veil. For thousands of years it has kept us hidden, protected. When humanity finally developed spaceflight and ventured beyond the Veil, we discovered the terrible truth about what we really are. More human mythology and superstition," Velkris scoffed. "Supreme Commander, permission to begin the assault?" But Captain Chen continued, her voice taking on an urgent tone. "The Veil wasn't keeping the galaxy safe from us. It was keeping us safe from ourselves. Commander Zarketh, I'm transmitting our historical records. Please look at them. See what happened to the last 5 species that ignored our warnings." Zarketh gestured to his science officer. "Humor the human. Download their data." The files appeared on his personal display, showing grainy footage and sensor readings from various alien encounters over the past century. Each one showed the same pattern. Alien fleets approaching Earth, ignoring warnings, crossing into the inner system, and then nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, no distress signals. Just empty space where ships had been. "Clever editing and propaganda," Zarketh announced. "You expect us to believe that your weak species has destroyed 5 invasion fleets without leaving any trace? Where are your weapons? Where are your defense stations? All we see is empty space and a handful of obsolete vessels." Captain Chen's expression grew even more somber. "That's because we are the weapon, Commander. Every human being carries within their genetic code a dormant defense mechanism, a gift or curse from our ancient past. When Earth is truly threatened, when hostile forces breach the inner system with intent to destroy, that mechanism activates. We don't control it. We can't stop it once it starts. Please, I'm begging you, turn back now. The transmission ended abruptly as Captain Chen's ship began moving away from the Krovan fleet, joining the other human vessels in a full retreat toward Earth. They were abandoning the outer system entirely, falling back to Mars orbit. Zarketh stood in silence for a moment, processing what he had heard. The humans were either insane or attempting the most audacious bluff in galactic history. Supreme Commander, Velkris ventured, should we proceed with the attack? Zarketh's four eyes narrowed as he watched the human ships retreat. Of course we proceed, but we will be cautious. Send a single probe ship first. Let us see what these humans are so desperate to protect. Order the Relentless Claw to advance into the inner system and report on any anomalies. The Relentless Claw, a destroyer-class vessel with a crew of 300 Krovan warriors, broke formation and accelerated toward the inner planets. Its captain, Gorvik, was young and eager for glory. He pushed his ship's engines to maximum, racing past Mars and approaching Earth's moon. His sensor officer reported nothing unusual. No hidden weapons platforms, no cloaked ships, no energy barriers. Just empty space and a blue-green world that looked ripe for conquest. Approaching Earth orbit now, Supreme Commander, Gorvik reported over the comm channel. No signs of resistance. The humans appear to have retreated to their planet's surface. Wait, I'm detecting some kind of energy fluctuation. It's not technological. It's almost biological in nature, like something alive is responding to our presence. The signal from the Relentless Claw began to distort. Static filled the communication channel as Gorvik's voice became increasingly panicked. Something's happening to the crew. They're screaming about voices in their heads, about the walls becoming liquid. The ship's molecular structure is destabilizing. We need to retreat immediately. But it was too late. On every screen throughout the Krovan fleet, they watched in horror as the Relentless Claw simply dissolved. Not exploded, not torn apart, but unraveled at the atomic level like a sand sculpture being blown away by wind. Within seconds, a destroyer-class warship and 300 of the Empire's finest warriors had been reduced to their component atoms, dispersing into the cosmic void. Zarketh stood frozen, his forearms hanging limp at his sides. In 500 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The humans hadn't fired a single weapon. They hadn't even moved their ships from Mars orbit. Yet somehow they had completely annihilated one of his vessels without leaving enough debris to fill a storage container. Supreme Commander, Velkris whispered, his earlier confidence completely gone. What are your orders? Before Zarketh could respond, every screen on the bridge flickered to life. But instead of showing Captain Chen or any human military officer, they displayed a young human child, perhaps 8 years old, with bright blue eyes and golden hair. She was sitting in what appeared to be a classroom, surrounded by other human children who were drawing pictures with colored instruments. Hello. Alien visitors? The child said in perfect Krovan, though her lips moved in the pattern of human speech. My name is Emma. My teacher says I should talk to you because you don't understand why you need to leave. She tilted her head, studying them with the curiosity that only a child could possess. You're scared now, aren't you? You saw what happened. To your friends. How is this possible? Zarketh demanded. How can a human child access our secured communications? Emma giggled, a sound that sent chills through every Krovan on the bridge. We're not really humans, silly. Well, we are, but we're also something else. Something very old that went to sleep a long time ago. The grown-ups call it genetic memory or evolutionary defense, but I think it's more like we're the galaxy's immune system. When bad germs try to hurt Earth, we wake up and make them go away. She held up a drawing she had been working on. It showed stick figures representing humans standing on Earth, surrounded by a glowing barrier with alien ships dissolving into sparkles around them. My teacher says that long ago, before humans looked like humans, we were something different. Something that scared everyone so much that they locked us on Earth and made us forget. But our bodies remember. When someone tries to hurt our home, we remember how to unmake things. This is impossible, Velcris protested. No species has this kind of power. You're trying to trick us with holograms and psychological warfare. Emma's expression grew serious, far too serious for a child her age. Mr. Alien, I'm trying to help you. Right now, only the people near Earth are waking up. But if you bring your whole fleet here, if you try to hurt our planet, then all of us will wake up. 8 billion humans all remembering at once what we used to be. And once we remember completely, we won't be able to forget again. We'll have to leave Earth and go back to what we were before. The things that made the ancient races so afraid that they built the veil to keep us contained. She paused, picking up a red coloring stick. Do you know what we used to call ourselves before we became human? We were the devourers. We consumed entire star systems, breaking down matter and energy to feed our endless hunger. The other races tricked us, made us small and weak and forgetful, gave us imagination and creativity and love to replace the hunger. But if you make us remember the hunger, then the galaxy will have to face the devourers again. The ancient secret. The bridge of the inevitable victory remained silent for several long moments after the child's transmission ended. Every Croavan present stood frozen, processing the impossible claim they had just heard. Commander Zarketh's scales had turned pale, a sign of deep distress in his species. The destruction of the relentless claw played over and over on the tactical displays, a ship and crew of 300 simply ceasing to exist without any detectable weapon being fired. Sub-Commander Velcris was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Supreme Commander, I've run the historical databases. There are legends, ancient texts from the First Galactic Council over 10,000 cycles ago. They speak of a race called the Void Hunters, beings that existed partially in our dimension and partially in others. They consumed everything they encountered until the combined might of 17 species managed to trap and transform them. Zarketh's 4 eyes focused on his tactical officer. And you believe these humans are the descendants of these mythical creatures? His tone suggested skepticism, but there was an undertone of fear that his crew had never heard before. Before Velcris could respond, another human appeared on their screens. This time it was an elderly man with silver hair and deep-set gray eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. He wore simple civilian clothes, rather than a military uniform, and he stood in what appeared to be a vast library filled with ancient books and artifacts. Commander Zarketh, the man began, his voice calm and measured. I am Professor Marcus Reed, Earth's historian and keeper of the genetic archives. I understand your skepticism. For most of human history, we too believed we were simply another young species struggling to reach the stars. It wasn't until we ventured beyond the veil and encountered other races that we began to piece together the truth. The professor gestured to the books surrounding him. These are not human texts. They are copies of records we've obtained from various species over the past century, all telling the same story from different perspectives. The Void Hunters, the Devourers, the Entropy Bringers. Every culture had a different name for them, but they all described the same beings. Creatures that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, feeding on the very fabric of reality itself. Velcris pulled up his own historical databases, cross-referencing the terms. To his horror, he found matching entries in the most restricted archives of the Croavan Empire, files that required the highest security clearance to access. The descriptions were vague, written in the ancient languages of long-dead civilizations, but they all spoke of a terror that had once threatened all life in the galaxy. Professor Reed continued, pulling out a crystalline device that projected a holographic double helix into the air. This is human DNA, or at least what it appears to be on the surface. But when we examined it more closely, we found something extraordinary. Every human carries genetic markers that shouldn't exist, segments of code that operate on principles we don't fully understand. These segments remain dormant under normal circumstances, but when Earth faces an existential threat, they activate. He manipulated the projection, zooming in on specific segments of the genetic code. Watch what happens when we simulate a threat response. The DNA strand began to glow and shift, unfolding into patterns that hurt to look at, geometries that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. This is what happened to your ship, Commander. The humans aboard our vessels at Mars are beginning to experience the early stages of awakening. They're reporting shared consciousness, the ability to perceive quantum fluctuations, and an overwhelming urge to dissolve and reconstitute matter. Captain Chen appeared beside the professor, and Zarketh could see the change in her. Her eyes now held flecks of gold that seemed to move like liquid, and her skin had a subtle luminescence that hadn't been there before. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the ship's hull, "we've evacuated all human colonies and brought everyone back to Earth. We're trying to contain the awakening to keep it localized, but if your fleet advances, if you force us to defend ourselves fully, we won't be able to stop what happens next." Zarketh found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. "You expect me to believe that humanity, a species that only achieved spaceflight within the last few centuries, is actually an ancient race of galaxy-devouring monsters?" Professor Reed's expression grew sad. "Not monsters, Commander. Survivors. The ancient races couldn't destroy the Void Hunters. They were too integrated into the fabric of reality itself. Instead, they found a way to change them, to give them physical form, to lock away their memories and abilities behind genetic barriers. They became human, capable of love, creativity, and growth, but always carrying within them the potential to revert." The professor brought up another display, showing a map of the galaxy with several systems highlighted in red. "These are the 5 civilizations that ignored our warnings over the past century: the Malkorian Confederacy, the Beta Z Union, the Tracian Empire, the Vorthon Collective, and the Zanari Dominion. None of them exist anymore. Not because we destroyed them, but because the partial awakening of human consciousness unraveled the quantum foundations of their space. Their stars still burn, their planets still orbit, but nothing more complex than basic elements can exist there now." A new alarm sounded on the bridge of the inevitable victory. Sensor readings showed that space around Earth was beginning to change. The cosmic background radiation was fluctuating in impossible patterns, and the gravitational constants were shifting slightly. It was as if reality itself was becoming malleable in the presence of an awakening humanity. "Supreme Commander," the science officer reported, voice trembling, "we're detecting massive quantum instabilities throughout the inner system. The effect is spreading outward at approximately 1/10 light speed. If it continues, it will reach our position in 6 hours." Emma, the young girl from before, appeared on a secondary screen. She was no longer in her classroom but standing in a field, looking up at the stars. Even through the transmission, they could see that her eyes were now completely golden, glowing with an inner light. "The other children are waking up faster than the adults," she said, her voice carrying the weight of eons. "We remember playing, between the stars, swimming through nebulae, tasting the exotic matter at the hearts of black holes. It was beautiful, but so lonely. We consumed everything we touched because we didn't know how to do anything else." She turned to face the camera directly, and for a moment, Zarketh thought he could see through her, as if she existed in multiple layers of reality simultaneously. "That's why the old races changed us. They didn't just want to stop us, they wanted to save us. They gave us mortality so we could understand the value of life. They gave us physical bodies so we could experience touch and comfort. They gave us emotions so we could know love and fear and joy. But they always knew that if we were threatened, if our existence was at stake, the old nature would surface." Velcris was frantically working at his console, running simulations and calculations. "Supreme Commander, if what they're saying is true, if humanity really is what they claim, then advancing would be suicide, not just for our fleet but potentially for the entire Croavan Empire. The quantum destabilization could follow our hyperspace trails back to our home systems." Another ship appeared on the edge of Earth's influence, not Croavan, but Zanari, one of their client species. It was a small scout vessel that had been monitoring the situation. As they watched, it crossed some invisible threshold near Earth's moon. The crew's final transmission was not a scream of terror, but a sound of recognition, as if they suddenly understood something fundamental about the universe. Then the ship began to phase in and out of existence, its matter converting to energy and back again in rapid cycles until it simply dispersed into the cosmic background. Commander Zarketh stood at the crossroads of decision. His entire military career, the glory of the Krovan Empire, the doctrine of conquest that had driven his species for millennia, all of it meant nothing in the face of what he was witnessing. He thought of the billions of Krovan citizens on distant worlds, unaware that their supreme commander was facing something that could end their entire civilization. Professor Reed spoke one more time. "Commander, there's something else you need to know. The transformation isn't just affecting humans on Earth. Every human throughout the galaxy is beginning to change. Those on your prison worlds, those in your research facilities, even the human slaves in your empire's core worlds. They're all connected at the quantum level. If humanity fully awakens, it won't matter where they are physically. The change will happen everywhere simultaneously." Reports began flooding in from across the Krovan Empire. Human slaves were exhibiting strange behaviors, speaking in unison across vast distances, their eyes beginning to glow with the same golden light. Some were walking through solid walls, others were healing from fatal injuries within seconds, and a few had simply vanished, leaving behind only a faint impression in the quantum field. Zarketh made his decision. All ships, emergency retreat. Maximum hyperspace velocity away from this system. Send priority messages to all Krovan worlds. Evacuate all humans to uninhabited systems immediately. Do not harm them. Do not threaten them. Just relocate them peacefully. "But Supreme Commander," Velkris protested, "the Empire will see this as cowardice. You'll be stripped of rank, possibly executed for treason." Zarketh turned to his subordinate, his four eyes reflecting a wisdom born of survival instinct. "Better to live in disgrace than to die in ignorance. We came here as conquerors and discovered we were insects approaching a sleeping giant. The humans have given us a gift, a warning. We would be fools not to heed it." As the Krovan fleet began its retreat, Captain Chen's image appeared one last time. "Thank you, Commander. You've made the wise choice. We'll contain the awakening, push it back down into dormancy. But please spread the word to other species. Earth is not a planet to be conquered. It's a sanctuary for something that should never be fully awakened. We're not your enemies, but we're not entirely your friends, either. We're something in between, forever balanced between what we were and what we've become." The last thing Zarketh saw before entering hyperspace was Earth itself, the blue-green jewel that held 8 billion sleeping gods. For a brief moment, he thought he could see a shimmer around the planet like a vast eye opening and then slowly closing again. The veil was reasserting itself, hiding humanity from the galaxy once more. In the aftermath of the Krovan retreat, the galaxy's great powers received a simple message broadcast on all frequencies. Earth's borders are now closed. Any ship entering the Sol system does so at its own risk. We seek no conflict, no expansion, no empire. We wish only to exist in peace. But if you come with hostile intent, you will discover why the ancients feared the Void Hunters. You will learn why they went to such lengths to change us into something else. And you will understand, in your final moments, why some sleeping giants should never be awakened. The message was signed simply, "Humanity, the children of the Devourers." From that day forward, the Sol system was marked on every star chart with the ancient symbol for forbidden space. Trade could occur at the edge of the system, and diplomatic missions were permitted with extreme restrictions, but no military vessel dared to cross into Terran space. The few pirates and raiders foolish enough to ignore the warnings were never heard from again, their ships found drifting at the edge of the system, completely intact but utterly empty of life, as if their crews had simply chosen to cease existing. Earth became a legend, a cautionary tale told in military academies and diplomatic schools across the galaxy. It was proof that sometimes the greatest strength came not from weapons or fleets, but from the simple willingness to become something terrible if pushed too far. And in the quiet corners of space stations and planetary bars, beings would whisper about the humans, the seemingly weak species that held within them the power to unmake reality itself. Professor Marcus Reed continued his work, documenting the event and adding it to humanity's growing archive of close calls. Each time they were threatened, the awakening came a little easier, lasted a little longer. He wondered if eventually humanity would not be able to push it back down, if they would finally and fully become what they had once been, but that was a worry for another generation. For now, Earth spun on in its quiet corner of the galaxy, its 8 billion inhabitants going about their daily lives, most unaware that they had just come within moments of transcending their physical forms and returning to their ancient state. Children played in schoolyards, adults worked in offices and factories, and life continued as it always had. But in their DNA, in the quantum entanglement that connected every human soul, the memory of the Void Hunters slept fitfully, ready to wake when the next threat emerged. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, Commander Zarketh compiled his report for the Krovan Empire, recommending that Earth be given the widest possible berth. His final words would become required reading for every military officer in known space. There are old monsters in the universe, beings that predate our understanding of life itself. Sometimes they sleep, sometimes they take new forms, and sometimes they pretend to be weak to avoid becoming what they once were. Humanity is all of these things and more. They are our neighbors, our potential allies, our possible doom. Treat them with respect. Give them their space and pray to whatever gods you believe in that they never fully remember what they are capable of becoming. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Earth's warnings were not threats, but mercies. Last chances offered by a species trying desperately to remain human. And in the cosmic silence that followed the Krovan retreat, a new understanding emerged. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe wasn't the ability to destroy, but the choice not to. Even when that choice went against your very nature, humanity had won without fighting, conquered without attacking, and established their place in the galaxy without firing a single shot. They had done so by revealing the truth that Earth's greatest weapon wasn't technology or strategy, but the terrible potential locked within every human cell, waiting for the moment when survival demanded they become monsters once more. And so Earth remained. A small blue world orbiting an unremarkable star, home to a species that appeared weak but carried within them the power to reshape reality itself. The warning signs were posted, the message was clear, and the galaxy had learned to respect the boundaries of Terran space. For in the end, the most effective defense was not the one that destroyed enemies, but the one that made them choose to become friends, or at least to stay very, very far away. The story of the Krovan fleet's encounter with Earth spread throughout the galaxy, told and retold in countless languages and forms. It became more than just a military report. It became a myth, a legend, a reminder that in the vast darkness between stars, there were forces beyond understanding, and sometimes they wore human faces and spoke with human voices, desperately trying to hold back the cosmic horror that dwelt within their genes.